financial analyst. I asked him to explain what exactly Greece did.
The government of Greece, borrowed money essentially through an off-balance sheet transaction, so something that was done on the private markets as opposed to the public markets. And I think what's concerning the governments around Europe and the EMU is that they were not clear in disclosing that they were doing this transaction. Interestingly enough, the transaction is not specifically complex. They're done every day. I think what was a little bit different is that a company, for example, if they wanted to do this transaction, would not be able to because their financial statements would be audited, and it would raise a red flag as to maybe, additional borrowings that are not disclosed so quickly.
So a country can do it, but in a way, it is getting that auditing now, isn't it, from the European Commission? Because the European Commission wants to get all the details about these transactions with Goldman Sachs, for example, so they can go through them. And what will that show, do you think?
Well, I think it'll show is that they're fairly straightforward transactions, and I think they want to check to see that everybody who was signing off on them from the Greek side knew exactly what was going on. Again, this is not the first time it was been done, frankly. Italy had done it, a much larger transaction as well, with JP Morgan, prior to this, and so it was not unheard of or new in the market. It was just new for Greece entering into the EMU. And I think what's really going to happen is going to be they're going to scrutinize to make sure that Greece was being as upfront with the other countries and stating, look, we are following the budget deficits, we are following the targets, and then from then, the governments will then feel that they were given a fair shake. I think now there's a little bit of a concern that maybe they didn't deal with as straightforward a position as they could have, and that's probably what's kind of giving a little bit of concern to Germany in particular.
And what some of the Commission are worried about is that Greece over-borrowed. Shouldn't the banks be looking at that as well? Because surely they wouldn't want to sort of lend to a country which is over-borrowed, just as they wouldn't want to lend to an individual who's over-borrowed.
Yeah, and I think it is true. I mean, when you do this long-dated transactions, 10 or 15 years versus a government, especially we do know that governments in the past have been, defaulted, in Latin America for sure, and in Russia and in Europe and in Asia as well. So the question is, the banks need to, evaluate the credit situation. Interestingly enough, this transaction, I think, was slightly different because the end result would be that, Greece would be part of a stronger entity. So technically, maybe the credit risk would be a little bit less because
they know they're going to be bailed out by
potentially
Germany,
have a little bit of a backstop, maybe.
Let's see what Angela Merkel says. She said it would be a disgrace if it turned out to be true that banks had already pushed us to the edge of the abyss, were also party to falsifying Greek statistics. Were they party to falsifying statistics?
I don't think they were party to falsifying anything. They did a transaction by a government.
A legal transaction?
Yeah, a legal transaction. The governments are adults. They are not, cowboys. They're running a country. They're running the public finances of a large country. And they have responsibility to their people. They have responsibility to their government. They're either appointed or elected or something along those lines. And the banks, are executing transactions. Yes, they're showing them to them. But the banks are doing something, that they want to do. And, no one made anybody do this transaction. There was no requirement. There was no, ultimatum that the bank was holding over the head of Greece. And I would say the actual ultimatum that maybe forced Greece to do something like this would have been coming from the Germans, who were saying, you must get your house in order to our standards, not your standards. And maybe that was a little bit, concerning.